I thought I married for love. I really did. His name was Thomas, and I was 23 years old, and I believed that the flutter in my chest when he smiled at me was enough to build a life on. My name is Julia. I'm 79 years old, and I've spent 56 years married to a man I realized I didn't truly love about 6 months after our wedding. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking. But before you judge me, before you wonder how someone could waste their entire life that way, let me tell you something about waste, about love, and about the strange mathematics of a long marriage. Thomas was handsome in a quiet way. He had steady hands and a steady job at the post office. He didn't drink much, didn't gamble, didn't raise his voice. My mother liked him immediately, which mattered more than I wanted to admit back then. We met at a church social in 1969, and by the time the leaves turned that fall, we were engaged. Everything moved so fast in those days. You didn't date for years like young people do now. You met someone decent, someone who could provide, and you made a decision. The wedding was small. I wore my mother's dress, altered to fit me. Thomas wore a suit his brother loaned him. We honeymooned for 3 days at a lake 2 hours from home, and it was there, in a cabin that smelled like pine and old coffee, that I first felt it, that absence. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the water, and he reached for my hand, and I felt nothing, not warmth, not excitement, not even contentment, just the physical sensation of his palm against mine. I told myself it was nerves, that real love grew slowly, that the movies and the romance novels had lied to us all about what marriage was supposed to feel like. I told myself a lot of things in those early months. By the time our first anniversary came around, I knew the truth. I wasn't in love with Thomas. I probably never had been. What I'd felt was the idea of being chosen, of being wanted, of stepping into the role I'd been raised to fill. I'd confused relief with love, security with passion, and I almost left. I came very close. I had a suitcase half-packed one afternoon while he was at work. I was 24 years old, no children yet, still young enough to start over. I could move to another city, get a job as a secretary like my friend Linda had done. I could meet someone who made my heart race, who I dreamed about, who felt like the missing piece I'd been searching for. But then Thomas came home early with flowers, not for any reason, just because he'd seen them and thought of me. And he kissed my forehead and asked what I wanted for dinner. And I looked at this kind, simple man who had never done a single thing to hurt me, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't break his heart because mine had never been fully in it to begin with. That felt like the cruelest thing I could possibly do. So I unpacked the suitcase, I put it back in the closet, and I decided I would make this marriage work through sheer force of will. Our son Michael came 2 years later, then our daughter Sarah 3 years after that. Thomas was a good father, patient, present. He taught Michael how to throw a baseball and never missed a single one of Sarah's piano recitals. He worked 43 years at that post office, came home every night at 5:30, kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day. He fixed things when they broke. He shoveled the driveway every winter morning before I woke up. He remembered my birthday, our anniversary, Mother's Day, and I was a good wife. I cooked dinner every night. I kept the house clean. I raised our children with love and attention. I laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny. I held his hand at the movies. I built a life alongside him, brick by brick, year by year, but I never stopped knowing. That quiet knowledge lived in my chest like a stone I'd swallowed. There were moments when I'd catch myself staring at him across the dinner table, this man I'd spent decades with, and feel like I was looking at a stranger, a kind stranger, a good stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. I wondered sometimes about the other version of my life, the one where I'd finished packing that suitcase, where I'd found the courage to choose the uncertainty of passion over the safety of partnership. I wondered if I'd have met someone who made me feel alive, someone who I couldn't wait to come home to, someone whose touch sent electricity through my whole body. I wondered this especially on quiet nights when Thomas fell asleep in his chair watching television, or on long car rides when we'd run out of things to say to each other, or on our anniversary when he'd give me the same generic card with the same generic message, and I'd smile and thank him and feel absolutely nothing. There were women in my book club who talked about their husbands like they were still in love after 30, 40 years. Their eyes would light up when they mentioned them. They'd giggle about private jokes, finish each other's sentences, touch each other's arms when they talked. I'd watch them and feel jealous and sad and angry at myself for settling, for staying, for choosing this half-life. But here's what I didn't understand then, what took me 56 years to figure out. Love isn't a feeling you fall into and then coast on for the rest of your life. It's not butterflies and racing hearts and breathless kisses, or maybe it is for a moment in the beginning, but that's not what carries you through. What carries you through is something else entirely, something I didn't have a name for until recently. Thomas had a stroke 4 years ago. A bad one. The left side of his body stopped working right. His speech became slurred. He needed help getting dressed, getting to the bathroom, cutting his food. In an instant, this independent man who'd never asked anyone for anything became entirely dependent on me. I could have put him in a facility. Our children suggested it gently. They worried about the burden on me, about my health, about whether I could manage. They didn't know what I'd never told them, that I'd spent our entire marriage feeling trapped, feeling like I'd made a terrible mistake, feeling like I'd wasted my one life on the wrong person. This was my out. This was the universe handing me permission to step away, to finally put myself first, to spend whatever years I had left doing what I wanted instead of caring for a man I'd never truly loved. But I didn't take it. I brought him home. I learned how to help him exercise his weak arm. I cut his food into small pieces. I helped him shower and dress and walk to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I sat with him through his frustration, his anger at his broken body, his fear that he'd become a burden to me. And somewhere in those quiet, difficult days, something shifted. I'd look at him struggling to button his shirt with one working hand, his face tight with concentration, and I'd feel my chest tighten, not with resentment, with something else, something tender and fierce and protective. I started noticing things I'd stopped seeing years ago. The way his eyes crinkled when Sarah called, the sound of his laugh, rarer now, but somehow sweeter. The way he'd say thank you every single time I helped him with something, like he couldn't believe I was still there. One morning, about 6 months after the stroke, I was helping him with his exercises, moving his weak arm through the motions the physical therapist had shown us. It was slow work, tedious, and his arm kept dropping because he couldn't hold it up on his own. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're stuck with me like this." And without thinking, I said, "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." And I meant it. In that moment, I completely meant it. That's when I realized what I'd been getting wrong all those years. I'd been waiting to feel the kind of love I'd read about in books, the kind I'd seen in movies, the explosive, passionate, all-consuming kind. And because I didn't feel that, I assumed I felt nothing. I assumed I'd made a mistake. I assumed my life was a lie. But there's another kind of love, the kind that grows so slowly you don't even notice it's happening, the kind that's built from thousands of small moments, shared meals, quiet evenings, inside jokes that develop over decades, the way someone knows exactly how you like your coffee, the way they remember to buy your favorite cookies at the store, the way they hold you when your mother dies, even though they're not good with words, even though they don't know what to say. It's the love that comes from truly seeing someone, all their flaws and habits and quirks, and choosing them anyway, day after day, year after year. It's the love that shows up when everything falls apart, when there's nothing romantic about it, when it's just hard and messy and real. Thomas died 8 months ago, peacefully, in his sleep, right here in our bed. I woke up and he was gone, and the grief nearly destroyed me, not because I lost my great love story, not because we had the kind of marriage that poets write about, but because I lost my person, the person who knew me better than anyone else in the world, the person who'd been there for every single significant moment of my adult life. The person who, in his quiet, unremarkable way, had loved me completely for 56 years. I think about that suitcase sometimes, the one I almost packed. I think about the life I might have had if I'd left. Maybe I would have found that passionate, breathless love I thought I wanted. Maybe I would have had adventures and excitement and romance. Or maybe I would have spent my life chasing a feeling that doesn't actually last, that can't actually sustain you through the hard parts, through the boring parts, through the parts where life just becomes life, and you need someone next to you who simply shows up. I don't know if I married the wrong person. I used to think I did. For most of my marriage, I believed it completely. But now, sitting in this house full of 56 years of memories, I wonder if maybe there is no right person. Maybe there's just the person you choose, and then the life you build together, stone by stone, through all the ordinary days. I love Thomas. I love him still, not the way I thought I was supposed to, but in the way that matters, in the way that lasts. And if I had to do it all over again, knowing everything I know now, I think I'd still choose him. I'd still stay. Not because it was easy, not because it was some grand romance, but because what we had was real. It was ours. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough.